Hello everybody and welcome to another painting video with myself John, and in this one we're going to be tackling some US Infantry for Flames of War. This is part of a rifle company that I'm painting up for my own force, and I thought we'd take a base of infantry and show you the style that I'm going with and how to keep it simple and effective as always. That's what I like doing. So without any further ado, we'll just get stuck right into it. So my American Infantry have been sprayed down first with two light passes of Grey Seer, that's the Citadel spray. I've gone for a light sort of coloration for the base because as I start putting colours on, it's going to start darkening down a little bit, and I don't want them to be incredibly dark on the base when they're finished. Now I do have finished ones sitting around me and I'm using them as a bit of a reference because it's been a while since I painted my American Infantry or worked on my Flames of War army. So it's basically just trying to relearn things, and looking back at them I think, yes, you know what, these are simple, these are nice, and they look well. I don't need to do a lot of intensive work, and that's why I thought it would be worth bringing this to a video, just to show that if you're into Flames of War and you always find your infantry painting is one of your slowest steps, well, the way I'm doing my Americans is just nice and simple, and they look good when they're on their bases and there's a bit of basing material down on them, and I thought I would share that with you. So this may not be a tutorial as such, this is just a bare bones. Let's put some colour down on them and let's make them look good enough to put down on the table. So with that in mind, the first colour I'm going for is a Flames of War colour, which is USA Tan Earth, and this works well for the trousers that they're wearing. Now the trousers are actually more of a sort of an olivey sort of green. They're called mustards, if I recall right. They're sort of a yellowy green, but once washes and stuff are down on them, it's not a big deal. They look pretty good. So I'll just go ahead and put these down. And all I'm going to do is just show you this little step, and then I'll move on and do the rest of the base, and then we'll come back to the next colour. So it's just a case of giving the trousers a coat of this, and then once that's done, we can move on. With the Tan Earth down and dry, you can see it looks very light, and that's fine. That's why I went for a light undercoat anyway. So the next colour I'm going for is from the Panzer Aces range from Vallejo. This is Canvas, and the canvas is going to be painted just over their jackets. It's the, I believe it's the M41 combat jacket, which has that sort of canvassy sort of coloration to it. So it's pretty straightforward. We're still not needing to be overly neat at this stage, but we are trying to define the edges of the items of clothing, so a little more care and attention on this layer will help us in the long run. And you can see that sort of colour that's coming through there now. And that's pretty much, I know from my M42, yeah, my M41 jacket or M42 jacket, that's more or less the colour that it is. So we're just going to be doing this across every model as well. We don't have to be too careful around the webbing, but we just need to be aware of where the bottom of the jacket is on each figure as we go along. While the canvas is drying, which it's almost dry, we can go on and we can paint the helmets. And for the helmets, we're going to be using Citadel Castellan Green. I find it's a very good colour for the olive drab that the Americans used on their helmets. So I'm just going to put a bit of that on my palette, and this will, because of the nature of the undercoat, this will take a couple of coats to do. So while this paint's drying, we have the time to add this green down, and then we can just tinker with it as we go along. It's also important at this stage to not go ahead and paint the skin, because what we need to do is paint under the brow or under the brim of the helmet a little bit too. And that way when we come to paint the skin, we can tidy that stage up a little bit. With the Castellan Green down on the helmets, we're again going to be letting that dry as we can put down another colour, so long as you're using something like a handle or you're not keeping your hands or anything anywhere near the miniature. We're going to be moving on to using some Rhinox hide. It's a nice deep reddy brown, and we're going to be using that for the wood of the rifles and the boots. So pretty straightforward here. The boots are pretty self-explanatory. This is why we haven't done any coloration on the gaiters or anything yet, because we'll be able to tidy this step up once we come to apply that particular color. So the Rhinox hide's just very simple over the boots. Basically just paint a line across the bottom of the foot, and that catches most of what you need, and a little bit on the top. On the rifles, we want to avoid areas that aren't going to be brown. So the end of the muzzle's the most obvious one, so we want to paint about there. I've just messed up a little bit. That's okay, it's mostly over the skin. So a little slip of the hand there, that's okay. And we want to take it back to there and then leave a little bit on the top. So being a bit more careful this time around. And there's a little bit of a stock or the butt of the rifle visible just in the crook of his elbow. So if I can keep that in focus, just a little triangular shape of it there. So not much more than that. And again, it's just going over each individual figure just to pick out those particular areas. With the Rhinox hide all down, I want to note as well, our fella at the front here who's running has the strap over the front of his helmet. Now this would be a very similar dark leather to the likes of his boots, so we've just done it Rhinox hide the same as the rifle and the boots. This strap is kind of a chin strap, but kind of also helping to hold the liner and the outer of the helmet together. So if you've ever wondered what that strap is, it helps hold the steel outer to the what I believe was sort of a fiberglassy sort of fibrous material inner, which is the liner which holds all the strapping and the webbing to keep it comfortable on the head. So there you go, we now know that as well as something else. Now we're going to be moving on to the slings of the rifles now, because every man has a rifle and every rifle has a sling. So we're going to move on to Vallejo Model Air Sandy Brown. It's kind of as close to what I can see is the color of the leather of the sling. So it might be a little bit orange in reality, but I'm not too concerned about that, because once this is all washed down, this will start to look a lot more interesting, a lot more realistic. So it's just a case of going over each of the rifle slings wherever they're visible, because they're not all completely visible. For example, this one here is just under the arm a little bit. And then we'll just pick out parts that we can see of the other slings. So this fella back here is wearing it across his shoulder and across his chest. And then it's joining the rifle further down. So we just manipulate the model a little bit and just catch that sling heading on down to join the rifle. And our last trooper here, holding his rifle a bit more casually, so the sling is just under the arms again. And if there's any of it visible on the other side, we'll touch that up too. There's just a little bit of it there. And what's great about doing this approach to painting the infantry is that it can be very... I find it quite therapeutic. I've painted a full mechanized rifle company, and there's been there's a fair amount of infantry bases in that formation, so it's just a case of, okay, this, the first platoon I'll do all one color at a time, and then get them to the stage of being ready for basing, and then do the same on the other one. Maybe take a break and do a few vehicles or something in the meantime, just to freshen up a little bit and not let the eye strain win. So with the sling's painted, we're going to move on to the black parts of the rifle, and we're going to be using Black Templar to do that, because I don't want to put metallic detail onto them, because I feel that metallic detail at this scale on an infantry model suddenly makes them look very tacky, and it makes it look like they've polished certain parts of their equipment to a shine that really isn't that realistic. You know, these rifles, yes, there would be some bare metal showing, particularly on the muzzles, but it doesn't sit well for me. So using the contrast paint over the Grey Seer, once it dries, does get a bit of a grey-ish sort of look to it. And you could say it's just, you know, well-oiled gunmetal at that point. It doesn't necessarily need to have that shine. But that is entirely personal preference as well, guys. So if it's wrong, if you feel it's wrong, that's fine. Then, you know, do it in a silver and give it a black wash, or, you know, do it in a maybe in a grey and give it a black wash or something like that. It's not, what I say isn't law, basically. The problem is getting the black down carefully enough in the areas that you need it to be. But I always find that if you at least get the muzzle, particularly on the Garand rifles, these M1s, if you get the end of the muzzle right, it makes the weapon look 10 times better almost immediately. So again, we have to be fairly neat here, but because we haven't painted any of the webbing in on these guys yet, we have a little bit of wiggle room. We can use the webbing step, or painting the webbing, to use that as a step to tidy this up a bit, and the skin as well. And there's just a little touch of it up here at the top. So that looks okay. Clean our brush off, and then we're going to move on to putting a base down onto the skin. So for that, I'm going to be back to Vallejo, the Game Extra Opaque range, which is a heavy skin tone. This is a great one-coat cover skin tone. It works like, if you're familiar with Citadel foundation paints back in the day, they work very similar to that. Very high pigmentation, excellent for a skin tone. So make sure my brush is clean and more or less dry. And then it's just going to be a case of carefully painting in the skin, remembering the brow of the head on some of these helmets as well, not to put the skin tone too high up and into that overhang that the helmet creates. A bit like that. So yeah, at this point, it's just a case of going around all the hands and faces and putting our skin tone down. So now we can move on, finally, to painting the webbing and the gaiters. And for that, we're going to be using a Flames of War color khaki. This is a Vallejo color, so you can get that via them if that's unavailable. So what we have to do now is actually get a smaller brush, which is going to let me use a new brush, which is great. A brand new brush from Ammo. Nice little synthetic brush. So the case of using the khaki is basically be as precise as you can with this step, because it does help greatly once you start putting wash down. So we're going to paint in one of the gaiters first, and they have a tiny little strap that goes down the side of the boot and underneath in front of the heel. I can attest to the awkwardness of the gaiters, but also the comfort of them once you have them on and have them tightened up correctly. They are remarkably comfortable, if not awkward, to take on or put on and take off. So as far as webbing is concerned, using the smaller brush, I'm going to remove some paint from it actually. All we need to do really is look at the cross straps on the shoulders And we want to make sure those are done as neatly as possible, because the wash will highlight these up a little bit and show any issues that you've had putting this color down. So this is probably the more time consuming part, and we've also got a canvas strap along the back of the helmet. Like so. And then it's just a case of painting in the various bits of the webbing belt. So they're all fixed with Garands, so they all have Garand belts, which are just a load of ammunition pouches, and then the likes of their first aid kits, their water canteens, and they have an entrenching tool as well, which the cover will be the same color as the rest of the webbing. In this case anyway. Now I know my Flames of War army is more Normandy period specific. If you want to do a later operational American force, you can start mixing in darker greens, very similar to the Castellan green on the helmet, on certain parts of the webbing, because the M43 webbing was a darker green than this stuff. But this, to me, this mixture of colours is very characterful and very iconic of American infantry in the Second World War. So once it becomes M43, you start to see the uniformity of it really take hold, and I think as a painter you lose a bit of the character of these figures, with everything more or less being the same shade of green, bar a couple of different items here and there. That's just my opinion, of course, so you can tell me I'm wrong entirely and I will understand. So we're just going across all the figures now with our khaki and just picking out all these details. With the webbing all done, I've went over the models and just tidied up a little bit. There was a splodge of brown on the top of this guy's helmet, which was annoying me for a while. But I think you can see in general how the webbing looks. It stands out nicely even before we've done anything else. So the last couple of steps really... Oh, sorry, I also forgot to mention the handles of the entrenching tools. I painted, I forgot about them, and I actually had to paint them in separately using a bit of Panzer Ace's weathered wood. I'd totally forgotten about them. That's my fault. I apologise for that. But that brings us to the stage where we can now give the models a wash. And the wash is going to be a good heavy coat of Agrax Earthshade. I like Agrax because it sits almost like an ink, tighter into the spaces than any of the other Citadel washes do. Unless that's just a particular... unless I've just got a particular batch of it. So I like it. I like using it because it gives me a very good solid shade. So we're going to apply that over the entire figure, and we're going to be quite liberal with it to let it do its thing. And once we have it all done over each of these models, we're then going to give the models a coat of matte varnish, and just for appearance's sake I'm going to put a little bit of basing material down too, so that you can get an idea of what the finished infantry base will look like. We're not going to be highlighting anything, I don't think, for a tabletop ready army like I'm trying to do, is really an essential part of this. But because it's been matte varnished and so on after all this, if I want to highlight it, I can. There's plenty of scope to continue on and do more detail work. So that's basically it. So I'm going to wash all these figures down, give them a matte varnish, put some basing material down, and then we can have a look at the finished infantry base. So as I said before, I've just added a little bit of matte varnish to the figures and then put some basing material down just to finish the base off. Mainly because I wanted you guys to see a completed infantry base. I didn't want the base just to have, you know, the primer and the mess lying around it. I thought it would give the models a more fair background to just complete the base. So I have. And this is the style I'm doing my Flames of War mechanized infantry in. So I have a full company of infantry that's painted in the exact same style, and I think once you have the basing down, they look pretty solid. Now obviously they're not highlighted, they're not going to win any competitions, but they do have everything that they need. You know, they have all the colours in there, everything's present, you can tell what the base of infantry contains easily enough, and with that addition of some basic material and edging the base in certain colours, certainly helps the fairly basic paint job along. So that's basically it, and I hope you've enjoyed this one because, like I said, I just like nice and simple looking infantry. I don't think you need to be going into a lot of high-end detail and highlighting and stuff to get something that looks pretty effective on a tabletop. So with that all said and done, I'm going to end the video here. So guys, thank you very much for watching. I really hope you've picked up on a couple of things along the way, and let me know in the comments what you think. So as always, thank you very much, stay safe, and I will see you all again very soon.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.